My name is Kevin Rafter. I'm Chair of the Arts Council, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this inaugural Laureate Ní lecture by Áine Ní Ghlinn. Áine's appointment as the Laureate Ní was announced earlier this year. She's the 6th Laureate Ní. The first holder of the title was announced back in 2010, but she's the first author who writes exclusively in Irish to be awarded this honour, and she will be our Laureate Ní until 2022. The idea behind the Laureate scheme is to honour an artist of exceptional talent and commitment, and to celebrate literature for children and young people. As Chair of the Arts Council, I was Chair of the selection panel which chose Áine Ní Ghlinn, and I can tell you that all of the panel members were delighted that she was going to be our 6th Laureate Ní. In her writings, she meets all our ambitions for a laureate, honouring the very finest artists in the area of children's literature. I know, and we all know, how challenging the last number of months have been because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's been tough for everybody, but the arts has helped us to get through these difficult times. For me, certainly reading has been one of those great escapes. And that's why we should be so grateful to our writers, indeed to all our artists, for helping us to remember all that is great about life and living. And I know for many young people, for many children, Áine Ní Ghlinn is one of those writers. She's written over 30 books, novels and poetry. And as Chair of the Arts Council, I really want to wish her well in her time as Laureate Ní. A few quick thank yous to our partners, Children's Books Ireland, the Arts Council of Northern Ireland and the Department of Youth Affairs and Children, as well as Poetry Ireland. But now, the main event. With her inaugural Laureate Ní lecture, please welcome Áine Ní Ghlinn.
Hello and welcome to the 6th and final instalment of the Words Ireland lecture series. This online event is in partnership with Dublin Book Festival and was recorded in Molly, the Museum of Literature Ireland. Ismisha Áine Ní Ghlinn an Sheo Laureate Ní. Before I begin, I want to thank the Arts Council and Children's Books Ireland for the great honour of naming me as the 6th Laureate Ní. 5 very big sets of shoes ahead of me to fill, but also 5 shining stars to light the way. I also want to thank Angela Flannery, Project Manager for Laureate Ní, for organising this amazing venue. We didn't really expect that COVID-19 would still be with us and that this Laureate lecture would be delivered to a camera in an empty room. So perhaps it's particularly relevant that the theme for this lecture is invisibility. According to Greek mythology, the magic cap of invisibility could render the wearer invisible. Sometimes known as the cap or helm of Hades, wearers included Athena, goddess of wisdom, and Perseus, the son of a mortal woman, Danae, and Zeus, the god of thunder and king of the gods. Perseus lived with his mother on the island of Seriphos. The king of Seriphos, Polydectes, wanted Perseus out of the way so that he could force his attentions on or have his way with Danae. So he found an excuse to give Perseus a mission. That mission was to kill the terrifying Gorgon Medusa, who had venomous snakes instead of hair. Anyone who gazed into Medusa's eyes immediately turned to stone, and the young Perseus would have faced certain death if it weren't for support and aid from some supernatural beings. Now, there are different versions of the form this aid took. According to one version, Athena, goddess of wisdom, gave Perseus the magic cap of invisibility, together with winged sandals and a mirror, so that he could look at Medusa's reflection instead of gazing into the eyes of the Gorgon. Another version suggests that the invisibility cap was a gift from his father Zeus. And according to yet a third, Athena instructed Perseus to visit the Hesperides, the daughters of the night, in order to find Medusa's lair. This version suggests that it was the Hesperides who gave Perseus the magic cap, the winged sandals, and a sack to hold the severed head of Medusa. The versions may vary, but the gift of the cap of invisibility remains the same. It was a gift. Perseus could render himself invisible to any supernatural being. In more recent years, Harry Potter also had an invisibility cloak. It was gifted to him by Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Wizardry. The cloak originally came from Harry's father, James, and was accompanied by a note from Dumbledore. "Your father left this in my possession when he died. It's time it was returned to you. Use it well." Use it well. The words suggest choice. Harry could don the cloak as he pleased. Like Perseus, he could choose when to become invisible. Like Perseus, invisibility would help him in his quest. I too have an invisibility cloak, an invisibility cap. Call it what you wish. Cloca do eachachta, helm na gailge. Helm na scríbhneoireachta do dhaoine óga. It's part of my quest, my journey as an Irish language writer, and specifically as a scríbhneoir gailge do dhaoine óga. I wear my cloak of invisibility when I write. So do all my colleagues who write os gailge. Indeed, so do the vast majority of my colleagues who write for children in English or Irish. Apart from a limited number of household names, most children's writers tend to slip under the radar, unreviewed, unseen, under the invisibility cloak. Some research was done on this around 5 years ago by #CoverKidsBooks. #CoverKidsBooks was a campaign set up initially in the UK, but it gained a certain amount of recognition on a global scale. The campaign commissioned research into book reviews in 2015. They got a children's literature critic to research children's books' media coverage, literally counting column inches. The results? Children's books got just 3% of all book review space, even though they accounted for over 30% of the market. While welcoming that 3%, #CoverKidsBooks recognised the need for more. They acknowledged that there's a lot of online coverage of children's books. But online coverage is most often found by those who know exactly what they're looking for in the first place. So the traditional media outlets, newspapers, magazines, radio and television, are still vital in promoting children's literature. Journalist and broadcaster Julia Eccleshare served as children's books editor for the Guardian newspaper for over 10 years. Her view on newspaper coverage is this: the whole point about newspapers is that they are the place of record. I think, she said, it devalues children's literature not to be recording it. And if we don't have reviews, we are belittling the crucible of reading. And if we don't have reviews, there is only noise. Only noise. When it comes to reviewing Irish language books for children, I would take it a step further. My greatest concern is that there isn't even noise. There is just an empty silence. How often are those of us who write for children asked, "When will you write a real book?" suggesting that a real book is for grown-ups and that children's writers are lesser beings who secretly aspire to writing for adults. Add to that an extra layer of invisibility if you write in Irish. How often are those of us who write os Gaeilge for children or adults asked, is it available in English? Or even more presumptuous, when will it be available in English? Suggesting perhaps that when our English is good enough, we might get around to writing a real book in English for adults. During a creative writing school residency a few years ago, a teenage student asked me to bring in some of my own books. This was an English medium school, and the student looked at the books with a certain curiosity. She looked first at some young adult novels. She looked at the covers, at the blurbs, the titles. She moved on then to books for younger readers and was quite annoyed that this was all she could manage. Every single day from then on, she asked me about writing a real book. What fascinated me was her assumption that it was up to me to change. It was up to me to facilitate her by writing my young adult novels in English. This was an intelligent young woman who had no idea that there is a cohort of readers out there who choose to read in Irish. She had no idea that books as Gaeilge existed outside a school environment. Those of us who write for young people as Gaeilge are therefore doubly invisible. We're in a niche within a niche. Invisibility within invisibility. We wear both the cap and the cloak. The difference between Irish language writers and Perseus, however, between Irish language writers and Harry Potter, is that Perseus and Harry Potter had a choice, whereas we live under the cloak all the time. We don't have the option of taking it off and putting it on as we please. Ours is not a choice, or is it? Perhaps those of us who write as Gaeilge do have a choice. We choose to write in a particular language, even though the vast majority of us, probably all of us, are equally fluent in both English and Irish. So the more important question for me is not, is there a choice, but is there value in that choice? I believe there is, for both myself and the reader. There are drawbacks, there are advantages, but for me the advantages of writing as Gaeilge far outweigh the disadvantages. On a very basic level as an artist, I enjoy the camaraderie of the Irish-speaking community. I enjoy working in a smaller world. I love doing workshops with students in Gaelscoileanna and Gaeltacht schools. I love the Irish language as a window on a culture. I love it as a language of sivris agus ceol, of richness and music. There are ways of saying things as Gaeilge that just don't exist in English. Have you read Monaghan McGann's 32 Words for Field? To mention but a few, Gower is a field of corn grass, Burach is a marshy field, Cuivren is a tilled field worked in partnership with a neighbour, Raylán is a field for games and dancing, and so on. To a city dweller, Monaghan says, this land may all look the same, and in English each would probably be just referred to as a field. Yet to someone whose ancestors have been cultivating the land for over 4,000 years, they look very different. Irish, like every other language, has its own unique voice, its own sivris, its own richness, its own culture. No language should ever be lost. No body of literature should go unseen. Even if it means an extra layer of invisibility for me as a writer, I love to see that richness, that extra layer that the Irish language gifts to students I work with. It's not just about bilingualism. It's not about politics or nationalism. For me, it is that sivris, that window on a culture. Exposure to literature as Gaeilge throws that window open wide. I'm not a fanatic. I'm equally fluent in English, but I am passionate about the music, the musicality, the richness, the rhythm, the flow of the Irish language. It says what I want to say. It tells the stories I want to tell with an ease that I don't always find in English. My father was the one who opened that cultural window for me. Like Harry Potter, my father was the one who passed on the metaphorical invisibility cloak. It was from him that I got my passion for the Irish language. He loved the language. He loved the Connemara Gaeltacht. He even had some subconscious belief that when he was in Connemara, every ailment could be cured. A few weeks before he died, he was getting ready to visit his brother in England. He wasn't feeling very well, and he told me that he was planning a trip to Connemara as soon as he came home. A walk on Thra War, he said, would sort him out. I believe that the Connemara Gaeltacht, where he spent the happiest days of his childhood and teenage years, I believe that it was his spiritual home. Irish was teanga a anama, the adopted language of his soul. Sadly, he didn't make it back from that holiday in England, and he never did make that trip to Connemara. But I think the greatest gift I inherited from my father was his passion, his love of Irish. Like my father, Irish was not my first language, but it was a fairly close second. Like my father, Irish became teanga manama, the language of my soul. I tell better stories, as Gaeilge. I write better poetry, as Gaeilge. And if that makes me a little less visible, that's fine. The novelist Patrick Gale refers to the cap of invisibility in his novel A Place Called Winter. Harry, another Harry, the main character, is in mourning following the death of his father, and the culture of the time means that he has to stay in mourning for 12 months. For that 12 months, he's treated differently by strangers and acquaintances alike, and it reminds him of learning about the Helm of Hades when he was in school. When Harry and his classmates first heard of the cap of invisibility, other boys in his class had bragged of the mischief it would let them work, the people they would spy on, or the banks they would raid. But Harry dreamt only of the way it would let him be entirely alone, unpestered, unprovoked. Unpestered, unprovoked. In other words, invisible, but free. So what do I do with my invisibility? Is it a gift? Is it a burden? I believe it's both. On the positive side, I have freedom, absolute freedom to move from genre to genre. Some people know me only as a poet for adults. Others know me as a poet for children. Others as a story writer for young children. Others as a writer of young adult fiction. My Helm of Hades isn't just a cap of invisibility. It's a cap of flexibility. I can do whatever I like in terms of writing. I can be whoever I want to be. And instead of being pigeonholed into one area, one little box, I can ramble from box to box as I please. I can have multiple personalities. I can be a poet today, a novelist tomorrow, a dramatist today, a reviewer tomorrow. Of course, there are disadvantages too. Invisibility is fine when you're writing a book. It's wonderful to sit at your desk, unpestered, unprovoked, for whatever length of time it takes to get that book down on paper or into the computer. But it's not so fine when it comes to publicity, marketing, readership. That's where a lack of visibility becomes a problem. Irish is a vibrant, living language. However, especially when it comes to reading, it's also a minority language. That's a reality that Irish language writers have to deal with as best we can. We're writing for a limited readership. There's also the fact that we're a small community of Irish language writers. This means a limited range of books in any specific category. So even those who are fluent in Irish and who want to read in Irish run out of books quite quickly. There are more Irish language books on the market now than there were 10, 15 years ago. But if a young reader wants to focus on a specific category, be it humour, adventure, detective, science fiction, or whatever, he or she will get through the Irish language books very quickly. So for those who are still reading in their teens, they tend to move more and more towards reading in English. A recent survey undertaken by Children's Books Ireland showed that for those involved in Irish language books and reading at all levels, be it as parent, publisher, author, teacher, the invisibility of Irish language books for children is the greatest challenge. During my term as Laureate Minogue, my aim is to make Irish language writers more visible, to make Irish language books for children more visible, so that all children have access to reading Os Gaeilge for pleasure. On appointment to the role of Laureate, I said, and I quote, "As a central part of my Laureate term, I want to raise the profile of children's literature Os Gaeilge and to bring Leabhar Gaeilge the Fáistí into the mainstream conversation. I want children, parents, grandparents, teachers to have the same access to high quality children's literature Os Gaeilge as they already have in English. Children deserve the opportunity to engage with Irish language literature for pleasure and not just for schoolwork." Now, I'm a realist. I'm not suggesting that I can change the world, but I would like to change just one corner of the world. I would like Irish language books for children to be out there sharing the same platform as English language books. Why? Why is that important? Well, let's look briefly at some statistics. According to figures published by the Department of Education in September 2019, almost 1 in 12 school children at primary level are receiving their education through Irish. That's over 45,000 students learning to read in Irish before or at the same time as they learn to read in English. Add to this the number of young people attending second level Gael Scolanna or Gael Chláistí, and you end up with almost 60,000 young people who can read fluently Os Gaeilge. That's quite a large market. So what can we do to make sure that they have access to reading Os Gaeilge for pleasure? There's one simple thing that each and every one of us can do. I'm sure every one of us knows at least one of that 60,000 young people who are being educated through the medium of Irish. A very simple céim step one to increase visibility. Would you consider going into your local bookshop and buying them a book? Just one book, Os Gaeilge, as a gift this Christmas. I'm not talking about buying a book online. I'm talking specifically about walking into a bookshop and buying an Irish language book for a child or young person you know. Now, of course, I'm assuming that bookshops will be open and not in a COVID lockdown. Céim though, step two, might be a little bit more challenging because it involves knowing what to buy. For some, that's easy. For others, you may wonder where to start. How will you decide what to buy and where will you find it? Where will you go to find recommended books? Where will you find the best reads as Gaeilge? According to the research done by #CoverKidsBooks, some people base their choice on what is being reviewed. That campaign acknowledged that children's books, in general, get a fair amount of online coverage, so I thought I'd give it a try. If I were a parent or a grandparent searching blindly for a good book as Gaeilge for a child, how would I go about it? Following the natural path that a parent might take, I tried a whole range of Google searches. I tried children's books in Irish, I tried storybooks as Gaeilge, Leabhar Gaeilge the Fáistí, by Irish language children's books, and a whole range of variations on the theme. I tried to put myself into the mind of the parent, godparent, grandparent who would like a child to read as Gaeilge, but who isn't familiar with the world of Irish language literature for children. The results shocked even myself. The books are there, but they are difficult to find. They are not as visible as we'd like them to be. When I clicked on Buy Irish Language Children's Books, the books that showed up were mostly books of Irish interest, Irish fairy tales and legends in English, a book of Irish baby names, flashcards for learners, and one translation into Irish of an English bestseller. Depending on the wording I used, I even found your search for Irish language books for children did not match any product. Now, of course, the books are out there, but you need to know the product, the author, or the book title. So blind searching online is not the way to go. We all know that you can head into an Irish language bookshop on Shopper in Harcourt Street in Dublin, Shopper on Spitale, on Chothurlan, and other Irish language bookshops around the country. We know that in any of these, you'll be spoilt for choice and advice. But not everyone has a dedicated Irish language bookshop in their area. And if we want to increase visibility of books for children, we need to go beyond that. Over the past few weeks, I have gone in and out of small and large bookshops around Dublin. There can be up to 10, 15, 20 books in Irish for children available. They might not be in the window. In general, they're not even displayed in an obvious place, but they are there. I've also asked booksellers why the selection is so limited. Why aren't there more books? And why aren't the books more visible? The answer was simple: lack of demand. People in general don't walk into a bookshop and ask for an Irish language children's book. Shelf space in bookshops has to be managed carefully. Bookshops are businesses and they need to give the space to books that sell. Irish language books don't sell in the same quantities as their English counterparts. Only a very limited number of customers come in and ask for an Irish language book for children. Now, you don't expect your grocery store to continue stocking a cake that only one person a month eats. So you can't expect your bookshop to stock a book that only a few people buy. Now, I know that this can be a vicious circle. So how do we break the circle? How do we resolve the problem? How do we change that? We must take responsibility. We must create the demand. We must buy the books. There's no point in complaining that we're invisible if we don't take action and make absolutely sure that Irish language books are part of that shelf space because we are buying the books. There's no point in going into a bookshop and complaining that Irish language books aren't there if customers aren't coming into those self-same shops and asking for the books. If 60,000 young people can read fluently as Gaeilge, wouldn't it be wonderful if each of those 60,000 young people got a gift of a book as Gaeilge this Christmas to read for pleasure? It's up to us. There's no shortage of high-quality books available as Gaeilge. As a regular reviewer of Irish language books for children and adults on Radio na Gaeltachta, I can say with absolute certainty that the quality of Irish language children's books is not an issue. 3 of the 10 books on the 2020 KPMG Children's Books Ireland shortlist for the Book of the Year Awards. A shortlist selected by an expert panel of judges. 3 of these were Irish language books. Myra Zeff's stunning young adult verse novel, Nóinín, one of the last books published by Coislife, tells the story of a shy, reserved young girl, Nóinín, who finds the love of her life online, a boy who totally understands her. Our hearts are in our mouths when she goes to meet him. Nóinín won the Book of the Year award. Also on the shortlist, Mór agus Muilk, Kim Sharkey's magnificently illustrated retelling of an old folk tale, published by Éavlóid, went on to win the Eilish Dillon Award for a first children's book. And the 3rd Irish language book on the shortlist, Skunk agus Smúirín, written by Áine Ní Ghlinn and published by Futta Fata, tells the story of Skunk, who loses his special little sniffy toy. 3 amazing books. If you don't see these in the bookshops, ask. If we, as consumers, don't go out there and buy the books, these and a host of other wonderful publications will slip under the invisibility cloak. The authors will lose out, but more importantly, children will lose out by not being exposed to 3 of the top 10 books of the year. Is it a loss to an art form if a body of literature is invisible? I believe it is. But more importantly, I believe that it is particularly a loss to our young readers if they are not exposed to literature as Gaeilge. During the 2020 pandemic, we've got into the habit of ordering online. Bookshops, including Irish language specialist bookshops and small independent bookshops, are now struggling to survive. We cannot afford to let them die. We need them and they need us. There's a whole ecosystem out there. Readers, writers, illustrators, publishers, booksellers. Now more than ever, we need to support one another. Remember, it's not up to the bookshops to display the books if nobody is buying them. It's up to us as readers to create the demand. If you are a parent, grandparent, godparent, aunt, uncle, and you don't know what to look for, don't waste time on a blind search. Instead, check out Irish language publishers. Go then to their websites, Ungum, Ontnochid War, Futta Fata, Cloir Chonacht, Éavlóid, Leabhar Cór, Coislife. Look at what they have on offer. Explore the websites. Look at the covers. Look at the blurbs, at the age range, and then choose. Then, armed with that information, go out there and ask your local bookshop to order the book for you. And as for booksellers, for the final few weeks in the run-up to Christmas, what about putting just one Irish language book in the window? If you need help choosing a book, contact Children's Books Ireland or contact me. I'm happy to help. Could you make sure that Irish language books for young people are there for Mamo agus Dado, for uncles, aunties to see, to give as a gift for Christmas? And granny, granddad, uncles, aunties, please would you give one Irish book for Christmas this year? Would you help me in my role as Laureate Nonog to lift one corner of that invisibility cloak, to pull the helm of Hades away from children's literature as Gaeilge? Give our young people the joy of reading as Gaeilge as well as as Béarla. Throw that window on our culture open wide. Support our bookshops. Support our young readers. Bíoch deisiacha, leabhar a léamh as Gaeilge, mar fléisiúr seachas díreach mar obair scala. Gur míle maith agaibh.